This is Beyond Perception, where it's all about breaking out of limited understanding and limited perception of life and waking up to our human nature, our true self, and to our connectedness with all life. I'm Simon Rilling, and my guest today is Dr. Brian Barnes. He is a creative and disciplined thinking professional with broad and deep experience in higher education, project management, and sustainability oriented leadership. And just to name a few of his many credentials and involvements, he is a scholar at the Foundation for Critical Thinking, where he conducts professional workshops in critical thinking methods. He is a philosophy professor at the University of Louisville and also lecturer at several other institutions. Dr. Barnes is also a head instructor in Hontai Yoshin Ryu jujutsu, and you might correct me on my pronunciation later. But also weaponry, and I'm already so curious to hear more about that. And he is also the co-owner of Louisville Compost, where he provides services, training, and products associated with composting and other sustainability services. Welcome, Dr. Barnes.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Simon. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. I'm truly excited. And for context, the both of us, we basically met I think 3 weeks ago when I participated in one of your workshops about critical thinking and Socratic questioning, which was really, really insightful. And I would love, of course, also explore that a little bit. But before we talk about what you're doing and might also talk a little bit about critical thinking, I'm really curious because you have this incredible curriculum. And if I counted correctly, you have 11 positions or involvements right now, possibly more. And from what I know, you also have your own podcast. And that leaves me already with a few assumptions. You are extremely curious and you must be really eager to learn. And you also must have a lot of energy. So, like, first of all, is that true? I think that was just
So
some assumptions here.
I'm very interested. I'm interested in living life broadly. I'm interested in exploring what's possible as a human being, and I was raised to take experiences seriously. So when opportunities arise, um, I try to go after them, and sometimes that means I have too many jobs. You know, what are you going to do? But that doesn't mean that it I made a switch a long time ago. I was exhausted because I was doing so many things in my life, and I really didn't want to give any of those things up. For example, the martial arts practice that I have has been 3 decades in that particular system at this point, and I have a lot of connection with um, international friends and teachers, and all that's really beautiful and valuable to me, and I'm so grateful for it. And when I was working on my PhD and I was trying to teach at the same time, and I had a side job at a grocery store at the time, which was actually my full time job, I guess. Anyway, there was so much to do. I was exhausted all the time, but I couldn't give anything up. Like I wasn't prepared to walk away from any of that stuff. And then, of course, on top of it, personal relationships. Had a small son at the time. Um, Parents. Just go on and on and on when you start to think about all of the ways that our lives connect. And so the lesson that I figured out, I guess, for myself as I started to look around and see what needed to be done with my life was I try to make all of the activities energize me as opposed to depleting me. I try not to do things that wear me out emotionally and intellectually. Of course, it occasionally happens, especially when you push yourself really hard. Um, but I try really hard to be energized by all of the projects, and I try to stay really positive and try to find the aspects of what I'm doing that can kind of help me continue on through my day and feel like there's a lot of potential there. There are always problems, but I mean, I found that I focused a lot on those, and maybe that was part of what was depleting. But I found it to be really different when you focus um, on kind of what the aspects of your projects are that are supposed to be feeding you, and I mean, not just financially, right? I mean, we can't we can't do everything that we do for money. I mean, that's swell and everything, but capitalism isn't, that's not all of humanity. That's not all of human experience. And so we need to think broadly about all of our life projects. And that, that was, since we're talking about stuff like this on this podcast, I just thought I'd share that little nugget.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Thank you very much. And when you say I try to make all aspects energizing me, that sounds very simple, but I'm not sure if that's easy.
You
And
you
was it that you changed your activities, or was it that you basically like changed your approach to the same activities? And if
I
so, how did you do it?
Yeah, I changed my approach. Um, the most important thing that I did, I mean, I'm sure all of us, and I do. I mean, I feel, I sleep well at night. There's no question. When the time comes to go to bed, I usually don't have any trouble at all. But I found it's a little bit of a metaphor, of course, but I found that every time I went into a different environment, I had to put on a costume for that environment. I
Mhm.
don't know how many of your podcast viewers might be interested in Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher from the 20th century, uh, such an important thinker in the history of philosophy, 20th century philosophy, of course, in particular, but one of the founders of existentialism. Um, when when he talks about human experience, one of the things that he talks about as part of his tradition is authenticity, and he doesn't really come up with that idea, but the way he describes it is really important. A big example he uses is a waiter in a restaurant, right? Waiter doesn't necessarily care about you. In fact, probably the waiter doesn't care about you, right? Waiter doesn't know you, but the waiter might give you an experience that makes you feel like that person cares about you, right? That makes you feel like this is a personal connection here, right? That's their job. They're definitely playing a role because everybody who comes in has that experience, right? I mean, with excellent customer service, we have this impression that this was really personal and really about me, and it's one of the things that made it so great, right? But for Sartre, the really important thing is that's a role. You know, that's that's something the waiter is putting on like a costume, right? And I got good at that. I got good at putting on those costumes and going to the grocery store and being the boss, and then going to class and being the student, and then going home and being the father and the husband and the neighbor, and the martial arts teacher. I mean, all of these had very different hats. They literally had different outfits, right? So I go to martial arts class and I change clothes, right? And then I'm going to go to composting and I got to change clothes. Like I'm changing clothes all the time. Literally, I'm changing costumes. And with it, I didn't think I was really a different person, but I was. And some people pointed it out to me. And I was very much trying to do a certain bunch of things that I thought were my responsibilities in those places. But I wasn't making any effort whatsoever to try to feed myself. They talk about in entrepreneurship, you got to pay yourself. You can't forget, right, that you have to get paid. Um, and it's easy to forget that because there are so many things to pay, and I love this so much, or whatever. And that was kind of how all of my projects were. I just loved them so much, and I was so concerned about their outcomes. And I'd been trained in all of them. I'd been taught that there's a way you do this, and there's an attitude about it, and there's a certain expectation on the part of everybody else who's coming to experience this. And I just stopped changing hats one day. I just decided to myself I wasn't going to do that. And I started really, really undermining so many of those systems I'd built up. I started giving leadership over to junior people. Even maybe if they weren't 100% ready. Started showing up in the wrong clothes. Um, I would talk about one area in another area quite a bit. I started doing a lot of mixing, whereas before everything was in its own box, you know. And I was really uncomfortable. And I started seeing really important connections between the different areas of my life and sort of how they were good for me, like what I was trying to get out of them. And I started thinking about what happens when I have a good experience when I go to the martial arts school. Not everybody else had a good experience, right? What happens? What is it when I have a good experience? When I walk out of there and go, that was awesome, as opposed to I walk out of there like, oh my god, what time I can't even believe, whoa, you know. And then I got to go do something else because that's the thing. Then I got to go do something else. And so, what's that going to be? And what's that going to look like? And how much energy am I going to have for that? And what kind of life am I living after that? I mean, it comes down to my life is finite, right? And I should be living the best one that I can. I think I I know that there are all these limitations within that limited life, but there's so much that I can do something about. And when I'm constantly switching roles and trying to be the whatever, often I get lost in that. And the part that's supposed to pay me from this time, because I literally spent my life here with you, Simon, for an hour or whatever, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like this dude took an hour of my life like a vampire.
Shit.
But you and I have both been in those meetings.
Oh yeah, plenty of them. Yeah.
Oh my god! Like you're just like you're still on the thing going, okay, well, it's been really great. Okay. You just can't wait to shut this thing down. I'm over here doing key commands to quit before everybody's gone. I have a question. I'm like, oh. I mean, those things are really depleting. And so for me, a couple of things that I learned is that, especially in the really weird topics that I tend to teach and lead, critical thinking, sustainability, um, you know, very old Japanese martial arts, Zen meditation, uh, people don't know what the hell these things are. They just don't know. They show up for a class, they have no idea. They have tons of assumptions, right? And they have ideas about something else. They know about some other stuff. They know what they saw in the movie. They know what they saw in the, when they were a kid. They know what they did in gym class. They know their grandma had a farm. Like, I mean, they had these connections. That's why they're there. But they don't know this. And all of it's super precise. Like when you and I took the critical thinking class together. I mean, it's very precise stuff, right? And so for me to be worried, like I used to be very, very worried about how beginners approach these things. The beginner is going to bring whatever the beginner brings, and I really need to convey my interest about this. As much as beginners need technical details, they also need to know why I care. They also need to know why someone would spend their time on this. They also need to know, does this break a person down? That's not a thing that everybody's asking. But when you walk in a place, you can get a vibe off people. Like, is everybody here just finished? And it's 9 a.m. and everybody's finished already. Right? You walk into some offices and the whole place is just loaded with zombies. Like, these people were dead hours ago.
That's the story of my life. Yeah.
I'm gonna put a pin in that. But
yeah.
But see, this is where I think we have to look for the spots that are energizing, because especially if I'm talking to beginners, I can talk about the things that really interest me as long as I can make them beginner friendly. in some way and get other people interested in them. And then I'm out of here just jacked, right? Just ready to go. And other people are like, wow, what's going on with Barnes? Like cocaine or something, right? No, 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 no. You know, that's not, I mean, that's an angle you could take, but that's not where I'm coming from. I mean, I think
Yeah.
if we're not being fed by the activities that we're doing, we might be doing the wrong activities, or we might be doing them wrong, and we might be doing them with the wrong people. And all that has taken a huge shift. It took me about I don't know, it probably took me a 3-year shift to get everything onto the right page and to realize what the page looked like and to try to say, well, how do I apply these techniques to this area of my life? Because this area of my life is exhausting me. Right. And once you start seeing it, once you say, oh my God, it's just this right here. If I could just change the way this interaction happens 4 times a week. And then it's like pains in the body, right? Once you get that thing taken care of, you're like, oh my God, my elbow hurts too. I didn't even know.
It's like peeling the onion. Yeah.
It really is. Then you go, oh wow, there's so many things that I can, now that I've, you know, they say in the business language, they say eat the biggest frog first. God, what a thing to say, you know, but like take the biggest challenge on first while you're still fresh. I mean, once we get that big frog eaten, then, you know, it's like, we already did that. Yeah. You know, like that's the terrible thing is out of the way. Now everything else seems lesser by comparison, right? So anyway, that's kind of how it's supposed to go. So at least for me, did you switch over to podcast life because you were feeling drained in the business world? Is that part of it?
No. Like I was working 14 years in investment banking,
Right.
and like there was zero fulfillment for a couple of years, but I couldn't rationalize leaving that job. Yeah, like my mind was telling me, no, that's the best spot for you. Everybody else is challenged for you, jealous for your situation. And anyway, what else? Like, do you have? Like that's your education, yeah. That's who you are. That was.
Yes.
It was a process. I would say over 3-4 years, yeah, and also yeah, I grew up in an environment where being employed was basically the only option. Yeah, I was prepared all my life to be employed. Yeah. Yeah, and then that's a tricky thing, yeah. And that's also why this podcast is called Beyond Perception, yeah, because our perception can be so powerful, though very limiting at the same time. Yeah? And that there's so much more to be explored and to be discovered beyond what we currently know and believe and think. And yeah, so it was basically like I didn't have any plan yet, so I didn't know what to do or not. But I just knew that like life, as you said before, is limited. Yeah, like I don't know how old I will be, but certainly at some point I will die. And when I look back, and I just have like a couple of numbers on my bank account, yeah, and that was what my life was really about. I was trading equity derivatives, so it was really just making money with money, and everything was measured in money, yeah, and there was nothing else as a criteria for life quality. And so I'm also interested to hear what are your measures of your quality of life. But so I basically, long story short, I just threw myself out, and I was shaking like an addict, yeah. Like when I handed over my my resignation, really. And the night I remember that, even though I have had savings, so rationally I knew I will not die, but my body felt like dying. I was like lying in my bed, and my body had a panic attack, and it was like, I was like, am I really going to die? Like, this doesn't make sense. But why am I feeling like this? And I was, yeah. And so this has been almost 2 years ago. And yeah, I think I briefly mentioned it in the workshop. It like since then it has been a journey of self-discovery, and initially I started on another vehicle to like kind of create some certainty but within the same area of not really doing something for joy, but because my mind said, no, you need to do something, yeah, to figure it out. And but just like over the last 2 years, basically, it was changing course from my addictions, my programs, to really discover what I actually enjoy and what I would love to do. And that's also why I participated in your workshop, why I do this podcast, is I became to realize that the quality of information like you are exposed to really determines also your reality, like your actions, what you like, how you live, yeah. But and it all, but like it all starts with information. Only then, like you can have a better understanding of yourself, the world, and only then you can take other actions. And I was 36 at that time, so I thought like, or basically over the last years, it's discovering that there's so much good information, yeah, which changes quality of life like incredibly. But why is nobody telling about, like sharing that? Like why was I never educated in that? That was big questions. And basically that's, and the podcast I started a couple of months ago because and then I shut up. It's not about me, but because one of my perception was also I'm shy, I'm not confident, I'm not a talker, and I also became to realize that that's not really a very helpful belief.
You were able to make an adjustment.
Yeah, so I became to understand that it's just what I've been learning, but what I've been learning, my experience is not who I am or what I can be or what's my potential. And so I started um, approaching it differently, yeah, to like look at like where's my fear coming from, like why is that, like does that really make sense, what's the truth about it, let's go over the truth and explore it. Why should I define for myself a limitation before I actually have experienced everything there is to experience? Yeah, why should I believe something is not possible before I discovered like all possibilities? And I'm aware I probably will never discover all possibilities, but and that's also something I would love to explore a bit with you and here, because you studied philosophy and critical thinking, and I'm more a bit like an autodidact. I just hear something, learn something, see something, then I apply it, try to integrate it, and then and it's so I find bits and pieces, but I've never went through for example, like training in philosophy or a structured training in critical thinking. So that's why I was so excited to participate in your workshops and speak to you. And
It was good to have you there. I can certainly talk a little bit about that training if you want, if that's interesting.
yes, that would be interesting. One of the questions I had when you before you said you had like these different boxes or different roles or so, and then you decided to or then you started mixing them up and approaching them. Was it a conscious decision? Like, okay, like now I'm kind of challenging my approach, or like, and what was your approach then? Was it more like, let me just test a few things, or did you had like a structure to it, or like, for lack of a better
Yeah,
term?
so that's a great question. How to respond to that? So it was over a few years, and one of the things that happened during that time, right around the end of that time, was I became really invested in this critical thinking system. So that was maybe
Mm-hmm.
2007, something like that. I'd already been I'd been working at this grocery store. I'd been working on my PhD. I'd been teaching. and then all of the other life things, and then the martial arts school, and then I was doing this composting thing in its early sort of form, and there were just, I mean, just my time was just packed every day. Um, and when and so what I initially was trying to do was to relax a little bit. I have there's a in the martial arts school, there's a central teaching, if you
Hmm.
will. It's not secret. In a lot of old Japanese school, their central teachings are secret. Um, Ours isn't. It's the way you understand the system, I guess. Like if you're gonna, it's in critical thinking we would call it um, both a fundamental and a powerful concept. Those aren't ideas that we necessarily got to in your workshop, but
Hmm.
a fundamental concept is one that you build all of your thinking off of. So when you go to the foundation of your thinking, this is what you find. This is where you stop. You can't go any deeper in terms of where did my thinking come from, right? And
I'm curious, what would that be? Who you are as an identity, or
it
what
can be.
that reality is, or like
It
what?
could be. It could be because I mean, it just depends if I'm prepared or willing to go that deep. Like who I am fundamentally might be kind of hard. A way to start doing that would be kind of who am I in this role? Like
Mm.
fundamentally, how do I think about this job? And then, well, if I've been doing this job for my whole life or whatever in some form, well, what are where do I get my basic ideas about how to do this job, and what are my basic ideas? And you know, when I interact with this employee or this employer, this person doesn't appreciate our interaction. Well, how could that be? Right? When I have so much experience here, how could it be that we had a poor interaction? What caused that? I mean, I can say, it's them, but I mean, it's always both of us,
Hmm.
right? I mean, intersubjectivity is real. So we are interacting with one another. And I don't always know what that other person is thinking or feeling or what their values are or whatever. But if I have a role that involves me interacting with others, I could try to develop systems in that role such that those interactions could go more smoothly. I could privilege those interactions in my thinking about my role. How do I give excellent customer service as opposed to being excellent with spreadsheets? Right? I mean, I might have both these roles, right? But one of them is going to, they just require different thinking when we want to try to be creative and solve problems in real time with those different systems. And like you trained in finance, you might naturally, or as a function of your training, you might be a lot better with one of those systems, and you might feel a
Mm.
lot more comfortable applying one of those systems immediately in a creative way. Then maybe I would, because maybe I've spent a lot of time looking at customer service stuff and not as much time looking at the spreadsheets. And so somebody says, but all you have to do is think about it like this on the spreadsheet. And I'm like, there's only one way to think about the spreadsheet. And they're like, no, 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 no. There's that's not right. And see, this is the thing. When we have the logic of the spreadsheet, when we have the logic of customer service, when we have the logic of me, it's a lot easier to be creative, right? To find, and one of the ways to find those logics is to go back self-reflectively and locate the fundaments, right? If I believe that I should be very strict with my children, well, why do I think that? And you can't say, oh, because dad was strict with me. I mean, that's too simplistic. You changed a lot of stuff dad did, right? Right. Am I right? I mean, come on. So it's not like you're just a piece of tape and you pick up stuff, lint and whatnot, and that becomes who you are. And some lint is bigger than others, right? I mean, we pick and choose and we take opportunities to be like our parents or not, especially the further along we get in life. And we can certainly, as parents ourselves, I don't know, do you have children?
No, I don't have children yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Children yet. Yeah.
Well, maybe somebody listening to this thing will, but just in my experience,
I have nieces. Yeah.
I find yourself sometimes going, "Oh, I'm reacting to this the way that my parents might have reacted to it," right? And then we can
Absolutely.
we can make decisions like, "Do I want to do that? I know what the implications are. I'm a product of this and taking this seriously now for decades. Do I want this youngster to be this a similar product? Because that's, I mean, I'll produce a similar product, right? And maybe even less thoughtfully than my parents did, maybe more, who knows? But the point is, if I don't think about it, there's no way to know. And I could shape it differently, right? For all of these things. So when I have these fundamental ideas, you can really start off just by looking at them in every role that you have. And then once you're good at finding the basic ideas in various areas of your life, then maybe it becomes a lot easier to look at my life, my values, whatever those are. That becomes a different, uh, becomes a more easy to locate thing once I've done it in some, in some canned areas, right? So like, for example, you ask about what kinds of changes. I mean, those are, that's kind of a way to approach it mentally. But when you start talking about actual changes, like I mentioned, I'd go to the martial arts school sometimes and I wouldn't wear my uniform. The uniform's super important. You got to wear the uniform. But there are people in my tradition who say things like, if you can't do these things in your regular clothes, then you probably don't understand them very well, right? I mean, you should be able to do these things in your street clothes, should that be called upon, right, from you. And so I hadn't practiced that. And so since I was the, head teacher in my school, I took it as an opportunity to encourage others also to try that. Most of them didn't. Most of them were, again, very traditionally focused, and we wear these uniforms and all this kind of thing. I spent quite a lot of time over a couple of years going in there, working out in the street clothes, right? Leading class in regular clothes, a suit, trying to figure out how this stuff is different in regular clothes. And, traditional Japanese clothes are quite conducive to these activities in terms of movement and stuff like that. And you learn to move in, hakama and uwagi and obi and all these things that we don't normally wear in, sort of, well, in Kentucky. It's like so, um, so that was a little bit challenging mentally for me. It was very challenging in terms of perception of my own role. I could certainly go back and put on a uniform anytime I wanted, right? And I did, alternate, but it gave me an opportunity to think about what I was doing a little bit differently. And I was still leading class and I was still very much encouraging all of the other traditional principles, but just not this one. Oh, I didn't share the actual teaching. I was talking about the teaching. I didn't share it. It's that in a storm, a strong tree, or a tall tree in the translation, I guess, will break, but a flexible tree will bend. And so it's this idea that, we as people should be flexible, not only in the martial arts. The jujutsu thing implies, these are techniques of flexibility, in one translation of jujutsu. And so just sort of from the Japanese. And so we could apply that in our thinking. We could apply that in our we could apply that in our social relationships. I mean, all that stuff. And so I started trying to just do that. Just like, okay, I'm coming into the dojo, I'm doing this work, I should change clothes, but what if I was working on this material in these clothes? And it sort of created it immediately. I mean, immediately a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary space. I mean, that's what I'm working on, right? And then when I do things like, sometimes I'll be in my office at the university or something, or I'll be outside somewhere, and I'll decide that I want to work on a martial arts thing. And so I'll just do a martial arts thing while I'm there. Right. And sometimes I'll have some weapons with me or something, and I'll just practice something. And I'm very privileged to be able to do that, by the way, and not have to tackle me or shoot me or whatever, because the U.S. is bananas, about these kinds of things. A lot of places are. but we're, but since I'm able to do that, I've been able to take advantage of training in those different contexts. And once again, you have different social relationships. People don't expect that, right? You have a different literal physical environment. Again, I'm wearing different clothes. um, you know and then once I start thinking about these systems, right, my normal everyday walking around professional systems, just the walking around in it, not even the doing philosophy part. Once I think about that and mixing it with the martial arts stuff, well, then again, what happens when I go to the composting site? What happens when, I go to a professional meeting, right? I understand what all the expectations are. I understand that I'm supposed to change every time. And I just started thinking, well, what if I don't? What about the thinking, right? And so now, I mean, I don't change a lot from engagement to engagement. It's pretty much always the same, and that works great for me, because I'm very comfortable entering these roles as myself, at least whatever iteration of myself this is. And it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out, and that facilitates not me hijacking the engagement for my needs. It's just the way that I'm involved in the engagement is energizing for me. The questions, the answering, listening to your answers, the intellectual learning of all this, the sort of to my mind, the relatively complex work of unpacking whatever it was that I did 15 years ago or something intellectually that led to what I would consider to be profound life changes. That's, interesting. Why? I mean, I don't want to sit around and think about that. It becomes a little solipsistic, narcissistic after a while, I guess, to sit around and do that all day. But I mean, occasionally, yeah, why not? Because I think that self-reflection is important. And I also think that if I've got an approach that can help people feel, man, lit up all day long. I mean, I've had some caffeine, I'm not gonna lie. But I mean, if if I'm feeling, like this at 10 o'clock at night coming out of my eighth thing or whatever, um, some people might like to try
Yeah,
that. So,
thank you so much. Like the picture came to my mind, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And also the model, like that's my understanding of it. Like you have the thesis, you have a certain belief or so, and then like at some point it's like, ah, fuck that doesn't serve me, that's stupid or so, and now you're jumping to the anti-thesis, which is basically driven still like by
oh yeah,
compensating or confronting or opposing the thesis. So you're still bound in like within a unfree dynamic. And at
yep,
some point that when you have experienced the spectrum, then you're jumping into like a superior position where you're not bound to the expectations or programs so much anymore, and you are free.
I mean, that's a tricky one, right? I mean, I think that that's right intellectually. I think that
Yeah.
that's it's the same kind of problem that we run into with critical thinking, frankly, where if I start to think in certain ways that are very autonomous, often that clashes with my institutional responsibilities, say,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so I can consider myself free, if you want to call it that. That's maybe too much for me, but freer. I can consider myself that, operating sort of maybe with a lot of autonomy within the system. Um, but there are still requirements of the system, and that's where the danger comes in, right? Because we've all seen that movie where somebody just said, "Well, I'm not doing this anymore," and they stopped. They stopped. Dressing appropriately for work, and they stopped doing the work, and they stopped even coming to work, and they stopped paying their bills. Just went, "I'm not doing any of it," right? Um, and I think that there's a place where this becomes toxic. There's a place where this goes too far, right? And then you start to degrade the systems that you're trying to uphold. And I'm not saying that's necessarily undesirable in every case, right? In some cases, the systems might be so bad for you as they are that you have to eliminate them from your lives. From your life. I think that's certainly something that has to happen. Um, But I also think that um, if you want to maintain those roles, you have to know where the flexibility is, and you have to think about that a lot. Like, sort of, okay, I have, I'm trying to take this latitude with my metaphors of changing costumes and changing hats. I'm trying to confront that metaphor directly by literally not changing my clothes, right? So that I'm doing an activity in the wrong outfit, right? So does that mean I let all of the other parts of this activity go to hell as well? Right? And I think not, right? I think you have to have control over the other parts of the system in order to be able to address that in an effective way, such that, of course, you can create so much chaos that you can never do the work that you set out to do, right? If I walk into the martial arts school and I don't have the right uniform, and it's so distracting to everyone that they can't talk about anything except the fact I'm in the wrong uniform today, well, nobody's getting any good training done. Like, what was the value of that? Right. And so
Mm.
I think we have to be really careful about how we try to take these things on. If the goal is not to tear down, if the goal is just to tear the system down, we'll do whatever you want, because there are a lot of points of entry for something like that. But if the goal is to try to figure out how to work with this system to improve myself, which I think so many systems want us to do, maybe not always our employment system, but so many non-employment systems, the chess club in town thinks that chess improves you, so let's come and play some chess together. It's very positive, right? The swimming club wants you to come swim to improve your life, and just do some of that. I mean, I think that there's this sort of goal that's hanging out there everywhere, and the question is, like, how do I intersect with this such that it actually does that? And that's something, as a beginner, that maybe I can learn. I can find models who I want to follow in the organization who seem to be approaching it the way that I do. But it's a different challenge when I'm already an insider, and an even bigger challenge when I'm already a leader, because now my responsibilities aren't just to me. So when I
Mm.
decide to make a change, how does this impact everybody else? Does everybody else go slack as well? That might not be what I want, right? And is that something that can be tolerated at their level, whatever that is, right? By them, by the organization. I'm just talking about martial arts. I mean, whatever it might be. What happens in my philosophy classes when I decide to change what I'm teaching, which I do all the time. So I'm not going to teach this thing this semester. I'm going to teach this other thing, because there are so many things. I mean, in some classes, there's no way you could realistically get through everything. Like, if it's an introductory class, you got to pick and choose some stuff in philosophy, in ethics, and logic, in so many different areas. Like, you've got to choose, because there's no time to do it all. Even in sustainability, more and more. I mean, you can't, if you worry about environmental sustainability and, you know, and try to be complete on that, then there's no way in a traditional semester time frame to also get through the totality of social sustainability and economic sustainability. Never going to happen. So really, you can only really do a deep dive in 1/3, but then maybe you do a shallow dive in all thirds. But then what do you cut out? And then what does that do to I took an introduction to this area, right? And so one person gets a different introduction to somebody else, blah, 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 blah. You know, these things, especially if we're in positions of leadership or in positions of some authority, even if it's whatever it might be. I mean, I think if there are people who are looking to us, in seniority or something, I think we have to be very careful about these experiments from the point of, if we want to preserve the institutions. But I, as a human being, have to be I think in order to be my best exemplar, I probably need to be good at my human skills, whatever those are. And if whatever I'm doing is causing me to be less robust as a human being, then probably I need to think that through. If this activity, I mean, in some cases it might be worth it, right? Because I have a gigantic bank account and I can recover, so maybe that's is worth whatever. or maybe I have things that I want out of my life that are really important because I've struggled in these ways. But at some point, we really, I think, need to think about what a happy life is, and how do I get there, and what are the methods, and what are the values that I have to continue to work with, that I can't really be flexible on. And I think a lot of people don't think that through. I think a lot of people just follow cultural models that seem appropriate, kind of like what you were saying earlier, and certainly I did it to a degree as well. Um, I, I I would just encourage everybody to think that through. And I mean, this, all of the systems that I have provide, all the systems that I work with provide opportunities for me to turn the lens back on myself. To what extent am I living sustainably? I've got a stack of plastic over here behind me. It's not disposable plastic bags, right? But my boss, whenever I've got my boss in sustainability, we're doing one of these meetings, he just shakes his head at my kitchen. I got paper towels over here, right? I mean, he's just going, God, right? Because he didn't even have a driver's license, right? He bikes everywhere. Fascinating guy. You might want to have this guy on your show later. His name's Justin Maud. But he, I mean, people have judgments. If my Japanese martial arts teachers came to some of my classes where I wasn't in uniform, they would want to know what the hell my problem was. What's wrong with you? Right? And maybe, I don't know, maybe they would accept my explanation or whatever, but maybe they would find it to be an affront to the tradition in some regard. That's a certain risk, right, on my part. I mean, certainly when I go to Japan, I wear the right clothes. When I go to the trainings in Europe, I wear the right clothes. I mean, when I'm working with them, I understand it's not for me to freelance here, but intellectually, spiritually, I guess, if you want to, I mean, that's certainly the language we would use in Japanese martial arts. Maybe I have other goals. Maybe the learning of a technique is a vehicle to a different thing for me than it is for someone else who might just be trying to learn the technique, right? And so I can moderate all of that, but I have to know how. I have to have some sense of process, and I have to have some sense of the standards that exist, and I have to know, can I get away with this stuff in my sustainability role? I mean, or is that just you can't even do this work if you're doing that stuff, right? And I mean these decisions have to be made in some regard, right? So I think, and I think that's up to everybody. I think that's up to everybody analyzing the systems and seeing what they want and how they intersect with those, and just being really thoughtful about process. And I don't know that my processes are the best. I mean, I'm deeply committed to them, my intellectual processes, but I don't know if they're the best. They're good for me. They're good for some others. They seem to be pretty versatile and effective for my life. I don't know, but everybody should figure that out too. I mean, it's a lot of hard work to get there, but then I think you can be a little bit beyond the system, if you will. And it's, again, you have to be in a privileged position where you're not going to be constantly brought back down to, dragged back into fitting into the mold, right? But if you're able to kind of be a little bit more flexible in your roles, then this is where I think you can apply some of this work to make real changes in your life. For me, I all I can say is it's been dramatic over 10 years, 15 years.
Well, I have so many questions. So what I understand, like flexibility is key, but then also structures are key. Oh, yeah. So it's finding a sweet spot between the two. And one of the things I'm exploring is, and what I found intuitively very making a lot of sense is somehow that we have a part which is, or at least that some teaching I've been introduced to, and kind of like we have this left brain, logical, rational perspective on life, and then the other one, which is creative and like empathetic understanding, maybe a holistic picture, creativity. And you said something before along the lines of there's logic to creativity, which seemed kind of connecting it to hemispheres to each other, like, like and like myself, I've been living most of my life very rational and very
Sure.
but I think I was mixing being skeptical with rational, yeah, and I would also love to hear your perspective on that because also, and that was one thing you mentioned in your workshop, critical thinking comes from I'm paraphrasing, thinking in criteria. So and that was very interesting to me because I remember myself critical, like don't criticize, like don't judge, don't be negative, don't be skeptical. So that was very negatively attached to it, yeah. But
Yeah.
like and then so I would love to hear a bit how you put like, or is critical thinking contradictory to being creative, or is it benefiting each other? And so that's a bit of the things I have been thinking about myself, yeah, how
Yeah.
to put those things together.
Well, these are important things. Let me turn you on to a person. One of my
Hmm.
martial arts teachers for a long time. His name is he goes by initials usually He, Davey, Davey. He's an American martial artist, but he's trained in Japanese traditions. He lived in Japan for a very long time, and he pointed out in a workshop many years ago. He would be an interesting guy to have on your show to talk about these things, because he just brings this topic you're talking about. Just brings it up in his workshops, no matter what it is. Um, and he also is one of the few people in the U.S. teaching Japanese yoga, something called Shinshin Toitsudo, which is very interesting
Hmm.
and expansive, relatively expansive system of yoga in Japan based on hatha yoga and whatnot, and other forms, I guess. Anyway, that's not my story. That's Davey's story, but he pointed out something that was really insightful for me in a seminar once, and he said, um, relaxation is not the opposite of tension. That's what we learned, that this is dichotomous and it's wrong. And the opposite of tension is collapse, right? And relaxation is this point in the middle somewhere, or somewhere between, right, where you have enough structure that you're not at collapse, right? But you're not, the structure isn't so limiting that you're unable to do the creative things that you want to do. Structure can be so limiting, as you know, right? We get in a very buttoned up environment, and the creativity's gone because there's an expectation that the processes that we have are the right processes, so we don't need creativity. That's wrong, right? I mean, that's right if we only want to do a thing a certain way and we never want to change that. I mean, if that's really all we're doing, because we're just, for example, we know that this makes money and we want to keep making money, and we don't want to suffer the inconsistencies that are going to come along as a result of transition, right? We just want to keep doing what we know works, right? I mean, like the plastics industry, right? What a bunch of nonsense. Who's out there regulating plastic? Almost nobody, right? And so they're just allowed to go, well, yeah, there are problems with especially single-use plastics, but we just keep trucking. Don't want to disrupt that money train, right, for the owners of those industries. And so they work really hard in the US and elsewhere to make sure they don't get regulated, right? They say, it's consumer responsibility. Put that stuff in the bin. What's wrong with you guys leaving it on the street, savages? Right? It's like, well, we got so much of it, right? And it won't degrade in our lifetimes, right? Not, I mean, it's not going to break down naturally, for quite a while, for some hundreds of years. And so this is why do we keep making it? It's like there parts to this conversation. Um, So when we're really invested in structure, we're not going to be flexible, and we're not going to apply these methods, and we're going to find them dangerous and distracting and contradictory to our point. But I think that you do need some structure in that creativity. I mean, just as a martial artist, I mean, if I'm creating with kicks, don't I have to know how to kick? You know, if I'm creating my art with falling on the ground, don't I need to know how to do that? And not just so it's elegant, I dare say I fall in a pretty way, right? Because I've been doing it a long time. I think there's a pretty way to do it, and I try to make it pretty. I'm not the prettiest, right? Some people are really elegant when they fall. The deal is I got to be able to get right back up. I got to not get hurt, no matter how hard I got thrown or how hard I hit the mat. I got to get back up. And if it's on concrete, I got to get back up, right? So is my technique stable enough to make sure I don't get hurt? Like at all. I don't want to get hurt at all, right? I'm not some badass who's just out there like, a little pain's fine. I mean, sometimes that's where we're at, but frankly, I'd prefer not to have any. I just prefer to do it in such a way where it was effective and I didn't get hurt, whatever that might be. And so I don't want to sacrifice the structure that much, right? But then for me, as a person who's been doing this for, decades, I can look at the way somebody falls and I know what art they train just immediately. And I don't know all the arts, right? But I mean, generally, I know kind of what tradition of falling they've come out of by watching them take a fall, right? And I can mimic those, right? I can fall like a person who's trained Aikido, like a person who's trained Judo, like a person who's trained in some Kung Fu system, like a person who's trained in whatever, right? Because they're just different ways of doing it based upon the training that you have likely received in that discipline. And I've been fortunate enough to see some of that stuff and do some of it myself. So I can I can jump from style to style when I'm falling. Like I can decide in the air how I want it to look. For a lot of people, they just fall down. It's, oh shit. And then I'm on the ground, right? I mean, it's like, boom. For me, it takes such a long time to fall down. That is such a long time. There are so many things that I can do in that space while I'm floating through the air toward the ground. And that was something that it took me a long time to recognize. I mean, when I first started falling down, I definitely had the, without a doubt, and I think that's really cool now when somebody surprises me and I fall down, because normally I can really feel it coming. After a lot of time of people grabbing you and throwing you, you get a sense of kind of how your body's going to move when you lose your balance. And, it's easy after a while to go, well, I don't want to do that. Right? Because for me, again, that's such a long period of time now. I perceive that as having such possibility in the time that someone grabs me and tries to pull me off balance or push me off balance. I feel like there's a very long period in there. For someone who isn't used to this, it's that long and it's over. Like whatever happened, right? There aren't a lot of possibilities for creativity in there. I think there are a huge number of possibilities, but that's because I've really worked with that particular system and really, really, really broken it down, right? Into a lot of detail, into many parts, that falling through the air thing, right? And that comes from, that's one of the first things that people learn when they come to my martial arts school. So even the people who don't stay, I still trained them on that. So, I've trained so many people over the years on this falling stuff. And frankly, you got to do a lot of falling in the system. There's no way to avoid it. So if you don't like falling, this is not for you. Like, go ahead and leave. If this isn't your bag, then you won't.
That's also metaphorically a great training, right? Because we are falling anyway throughout life all the time. So we better learn how to fall and possibly also how to get up. No? It's an awesome training.
Well, since we're talking about fundamental and powerful concepts, sort of in martial arts, I didn't say what a powerful concept was, but basically it's like a key that opens locks, right? It opens a new door. Like none of this knowledge was possible without this piece of knowledge right here. right? This one concept is the one. And so the central teachings in Japanese martial arts tend to be both fundamental and powerful. They're fundamental in the ways that we were discussing before, but they're also powerful in this key way, which may or may not be foundational, right? Because you might learn it like way, way, way down the line, right? At any rate, what you just mentioned, the central teaching of judo, right? 7 times down, 8 times up. That's it.
Okay.
If you'll keep doing it, you can keep training judo. You end up, a grand judo player, right? I mean, somebody with a lot of credentials, because you have to keep doing that year after year after year if you're going to advance. And the people who drop out don't want to do that anymore or can't do that anymore, which is often the case. So I think that that's a great metaphor for life too, just like the flexibility thing, because sometimes you're still going to fall down. Like sometimes you're still going to, in some metaphorical way, we do break, that sometimes we're the tall tree and we can't figure out the right way to bend. And so we end up snapping. The thing is, the tree isn't dead, right? I mean, the roots are still in the ground, So then what do you do? I mean, tree can't get back up, right? But I can get back up. Like I do have that ability, even after being hurt, even after losing my job, even after losing my reputation, even, like maybe I went out and published a critical thinking paper and the whole world blew it to pieces, right? I'm now
Is it?
What's that?
Was that the case?
Oh, no, but I'm just saying,
okay.
Not yet. If it were true though, I mean, this is the thing. If I were the, that guy who published the anti-vax paper years ago, Andrew Wakefield, right? So that's discredited, right? And his career seems to be doing fine, but nonetheless he can't practice medicine because of this, because of that. I mean the point is, how do you bounce back, right? And what are the ways for me to be flexible? For a lot of us, when we do thinking stuff, right, we go down a path, and then once it doesn't work out, we go, out of hell with it. Like I'm gonna quit. I don't like this. I'm not going to do this. Do I get back up? Do I have the resilience? Do I have the flexibility to be able to jump back in? And this is where the structure. This is where you got to have the structure. Like I'm going to climb. I got to have something to climb. This business in the U.S., we talk about this bullshit about pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? So the straps on your own boots. How do I pull myself? How do you get up pulling on your own boot? Like, how does that help me get? It's awfully difficult. If you start thinking about it, it's quite the tough thing. More likely somebody came along and helped you, right? I mean, really, like, let's be serious. I mean, you got help somewhere. And so that's the structure. Like, even if you go into a societal metaphor, I mean, isn't that what society's for? I mean, I'm speaking to all the Americans, by the way, right here. I mean, isn't this what society is for? Isn't society supposed to help people as opposed to just being vehicles for the very precocious to make a lot of money? Right? And when people have difficulty, we say, do it on your own. All those people who made money didn't do it on their own. They didn't go out there and like grow papyrus and make bills and print the ink and make this stuff show up. I mean, just in their little hut. I mean, this is a full society operation making money. The market. It's not separate. It's not some bunch of heroes running around like ancient Greece just taking whatever they want and everybody else just like, I don't know. I mean, we're all connected in a much more intricate way than that. And people use the systems and they use one another for all of the things that they try to get in these ways. And so that system automatically pulls us up when we start interacting with it in appropriate ways. All systems provide an opportunity for structure. When I mean, what do? I'm trying to figure out martial arts stuff or critical thinking stuff and I forget something. Well, what do I go back to? A book, some notes, a video? Yeah, it's structured. It's right there. It doesn't change. That's my touchstone, my structural touchstone. Whatever my teacher said, I go, oh yeah. And then I go back and I create. And it doesn't look right. And it's not quite right. I remember doing some critical thinking seminars early on, back when we had, the big conference that I was mentioning in our session. We'll hopefully have them again in the future, where hundreds of people come together to do this stuff. It's great. And you get in the room with all the folks who are excited about critical thinking and they've been working with it. There's a lot of energy. And people come out, they're like, oh, it was the best session I ever had. And I'm like, oh, it was the best session I ever gave. And we're hugging and everybody's really stoked about it, right? And then I'll see my teacher at dinner and he starts laying out to me all the stuff that was weak. First asked me this question, is why did you do this? And I'm like, shit, what? That was awesome. The creative part was those people didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Those people who were so stoked, they've never seen this. They've seen it a little bit. They're, kind of in it. This guy's just thinking about the structure and going, you didn't quite hit that. And I'm like, oh, but I was using it. It's yeah, you were using it, but you were using it like a child hanging off monkey bars, right? It's over here, and I'm over here. And we're supposed to be integrated, right? So if the structure is not going to be problematic for my life, if I'm not going to find myself constantly butting heads with the structure, I got to find ways to integrate that. And that's where these not changing outfits all the time, not changing hats, trying to be an authentic person wherever I am, not playing a role. I can wait a table like this. I mean, I know it isn't what the restaurateur wants me to look like. I know. I also know that I'm going to give a great experience, right? As a waiter, if I know the menu, if I have the latitude to be myself, if I know all the things I need to know, I don't need to put on a role. I can just be Barnes and wait the hell out of this table, right? But also, if I'm Barnes waiting tables, I'm not going to want to do this for very long. The system's going to be pretty limiting to me pretty quickly, even though I might enjoy it sometimes, right? Because when I was young, I did this for years and years and years. I thought it was great, but I definitely see the metaphor. I see how it works, right? I just met you. How could I love you in ways how could we have made such a strong connection? How?
I guess it's the same hairstyle, yeah.
Well, no, for you and me, it's easy to see how the connection happened, right? Because we've had a little bit of time. But if I'm at the restaurant and a table of people come in who are strangers, and they walk out and they just had the best time and we're all best friends now. That doesn't happen at the grocery store, does it? Sometimes you're in the grocery store and you're going down the aisle and you keep seeing the same people. You keep crossing, they're going one pattern through the grocery store, you're going different. So you see them 9-10 times in the 40 minutes or something you're in the grocery store, big shopping trip. How come you don't hug those people in the parking lot? Oh, we had such a good connection, because nobody was trying. But the waiter was trying. And they did it. And it's sophistry. We talked about it in our session, right? Using all of these critical thinking and psychological tools to manipulate in order to get the things that we want. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Somebody comes to my restaurant for a good experience. They came for the food, but they also came for me, or at least somebody like me. They'd like to have a nice time, and they're willing, in the US system, they're willing to pay a little bit more for it, maybe, right? In terms of tipping and stuff like that.
So here comes my question, because that's also something I'm thinking about, how much your own intention or projection impacts the other one, or then also yourself. Because if you project something on someone else, I'm the waiter, I want money from them, it also tells yourself that you're not powerful because you're dependent on someone else, and you're not free because you're dependent on the money. But here comes also my own reflection. If I let go of that and I'm authentically myself, I'm just having a good time, no matter if they give me money or not, they might even give me more money because they enjoy my authenticity. Yeah. And so, and that might then not be sophistry, or is that? It's just being myself, authentic, and I don't care. I'm just having a good time. And
well, remember though, it also depends on the application, right? Because for you and me, maybe we're in a position in our lives where if we go out for an expensive meal, we would like a full experience. It's not just the great food. I like it when I walk in the door and they know my name as soon as I walk in the door, and everyone in the restaurant knows my name. So that every bus boy, every member of the wait staff, every bartender, they know my name and they know the name of whoever I'm with. I think that's hot. I think that's fantastic service. That's an extra step, right? That I don't often see, but when you see it, it's a powerful sort of thing, right? That might be something that somebody is willing, to go out for. I might not want to do that as the waiter. It might not be fun for me. That's a hassle, right? I gotta remember the names, and it's no good. I'm not into that. So the question becomes, how far can you go before you start to degrade the system to the point where you're not achieving your purpose now? Right? So for sure, this one table might love my authentic approach, and these other tables came in for the approach of this restaurant.
I guess that might end in some self-selecting self-selection process of like whoever client is.
Yeah, I think that happens with all systems, right? Because a lot of people can't tolerate the systems, right? They can't tolerate the limiting nature of them, whatever that system is. So they got to go, and so they self-select, as you say, right? I think we have to be careful of that, because that's where this thing goes off the rails, right? I mean, and certainly I've gone too far in all of my experiments of this nature. I mean, I've certainly tried I've tried to find where the lines are, and sometimes I've found I can't do it this way. I can't sacrifice this aspect of the structure in order to get what I want. Whatever pedagogically say, I have to keep these pieces in here. I mean, as a teacher, I try to strip things down a lot to the pieces people really need, because there's so much. And sometimes you take away a piece because it's still too much, right? You go, let's make it a little bit simpler. And then you find like they've lost a powerful concept, right? They've lost a fundamental concept. And now the story that I'm trying to tell with this material, I can't build it. I can't do it without that piece. So then I have to add it back in, right? And that's for me, that's kind of when I know, when I start getting pushback from other people who are like, I think you're running this system a little loose, Barnes. Okay. Why do you think that? Tell me about it. First I've heard of it. Tell me about it. Because then I can pull it in right there, right? First I've heard of it, right? So if it's first I've heard of it, then I guess we can still nip it in the bud, right? We can take care of it right now. And that gives me, as long as I'm 100% responsive to the feedback that I get from my environment, whether it's people or the system itself isn't working. Well, so clearly I've modified it too much, right? Because it was working before, right? So I've got to figure that out. As long as I'm 100% responsive to that, then I think that this works pretty well. I mean, it does take all of my time, but I can't imagine a more useful way to spend my time, right, than to try to improve myself and maybe create systems that other people will find useful as well for improving the world around us and themselves. I mean, I'm not a self-help guru or whatever, but I mean, I'm just trying to live the best life that I can, and I'm interested in sharing those ideas with others when they want to look at it. But I do think it's very intentional. Like you can make these things very intentional if you want.
It's very, very interesting. And from what I understand, like structure is very important. And one of the structures you're like basically living by is critical thinking, and the other one is martial arts.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely.
And also when you're sharing your experiments with testing the boundaries of structures. And also before you shared that, especially as a leader or teacher, you need to be very careful and you might be flexible in the content, but then like, and that's my assumption, there must be like, or you also mentioned it, values or some kind of principles which might not be so flexible, which might be the foundation to making that flexibility possible. And so I would love to hear, and I know in the beginning you said that you or you're using, for example, martial arts as a way, as a lens to see yourself, or to like and what's your perspective on life, and what are your values? What are the principles you have as a foundation, which I'm not sure you're not possibly not changing or not corrupting for anything. And I know that you're also teaching ethics, so that might relate into that. And I have a very very basic understanding of ethics, which is, and I can tell that it's don't do harm, don't do to others what you don't want to experience yourself, and that's it. So it's basically free will for myself and others. And but that is also very scarce in the society. So I discovered, yeah. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
For me, I I really do I try to think about my role in the world. I've been very deeply influenced by philosophy, of course. I mentioned the existentialist before, Jean-Paul Sartre. Even more basic than that, perhaps Martin Heidegger, who was a German thinker. He came up with a lot of the structure about society and the ways that society can mislead us and cause us to be pulled away from our authentic self. A lot of the traps of society. Um, it's problematic. Heidegger himself, maybe personally, is not the best model. He strongly supported the Nazi Party, for example, during World War II, which a lot of people caused a lot of people to just reject him altogether. But his ideas, especially this book that he wrote called Being in Time, is just so important, I think, for understanding our experience of just living day to day as a human being. And so when I start to think about structure, the term that we use in philosophy is called phenomenology. And nobody studies this stuff outside of philosophy hardly. But Edmund Husserl, Martin Heidegger, Bertano, a few other important thinkers in the 20th century, pretty much all the 20th century, until we get to Sartre and those. I mean, the values of existentialism, which essentially have me living life without a net. Like, I'm just here, and I don't know why I'm here, and you don't know why I'm here either, and you don't know why you're here either, and any suggestion otherwise is just nonsense. And so if we take that idea seriously, that there is no script, there is no net to catch us, we're going to be dead, every damn one of us. And it's not a question of what happens after we're dead. Nothing happens after we're dead. As far as we know, I mean, we can believe there might be other stuff. That's perfectly fine. And I'm sure in the context of your show, that's a delightful topic. Mm-hmm. And I've looked at it a lot myself. I don't, other than just things that I might like to have happen, I don't know that I see a lot of reason to believe that there are things after. And so that leads me back here, right? And it's not like the existentialists are the only ones who thought about this. I mean, the historical Buddha, I mean, certainly he was steeped in a Hindu tradition that, embraces things like karma and doctrines of eternal return and multiple lives and all of these great things. But at the end of the day, what's real? What's real is that people suffer. All of us do. That's what's real. That's part of life, and that's a tie that binds. And not only do people suffer, people think. That's another tie that binds. Um, People have opportunities to follow and to not, and that's another tie that binds. And there are certain characteristics of being human that, even if people don't take advantage of them, we can probably call relatively common, that I think will lead us to a certain kind of ethical life. Um, Not a traditional religious value laden one, but one in which I'm caring deeply about others because they reflect something about me, and where I really want to make society better so that, not just life for me, but I mean, I can take satisfaction in stuff that isn't just for me. Like I can see other people doing well and go, God, that's great. I can see other societies doing well and go, wow, that's terrific that they're doing so well. I mean, why's everything got to be about me? And if other people, like I can't do well if other people aren't suffering. I mean, that strikes me as one way to deplete myself, right? Because then I'm always in competition. I always have to set myself by the failures or successes of others. I don't. I, I mean, of course, it's inevitable sometimes because you compete and you don't win, or you compete and you get praise, and then you have to deal with the praise or whatever context that looks like. But you know, for the most part, I mean, I can just be. I can just go through my day and say, wow, nice job getting through the day without creating a lot of conflict, without, making anybody cry, without um, disrupting your systems, except in ways that are productive, right? Because you need a little disruption for growth, of course, in whatever ways there might be. I mean, that can be satisfying. Why not try to achieve satisfaction? Why not have that be a life goal? I think it's very difficult to be a it's very difficult to be a serious um, adult trying to do serious things in the U.S. without at least acknowledging the importance of capitalism. I think, um, but that can't be where all the values are. Nonetheless, a system to be manipulated. And so, how many other systems? Dozens, hundreds, thousands of systems that I could manipulate daily, um, hourly, if I chose to. Some of them I can automate, some of them I can pass on to others to maybe work for me, some of which I can set in motion and come back much, much later and see what they've done, like composting. I mean, there's so many systems that are out there that if I bother to think through them with these questions of what will achieve satisfaction, what will be fulfilling, what will maximize, optimize, what will get to the essence of this project in a way that doesn't just benefit me, because what am I doing here? I mean, standing on the shoulders of giants for sure. My struggles aren't their struggles. Whatever struggles I've had, they're not the struggles of those other people. And their struggles led to the lessons that gave me insight into my own life. And so I can't act like it's just me. And I know other people are watching me. Whether I'm a teacher or not, there are people watching. There are people looking to see if I'm a good example or not. Right? What about that guy that lives over there? When I see that guy, do I want to go, oh, well, he seems to have something together? Or do I go, oh, what a loser? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with if it's what a loser. I mean, so be it. Who cares about the judgment of others? The point is that what I'm trying to portray, maybe whatever that is, will be seen by others. I mean, I literally am an example of a human being 24/7. And so are you, and so's everybody. I'm literally making a decision. Another philosopher, Immanuel Kant, had this anecdote that I like a great deal, even though I may not like him a great deal. Um, this particular point that I am always an example of humanity in everything that I'm doing. It's like I'm saying, I advocate that a human being would do this right now. Like with my actions, I'm setting myself up for that. And I take that relatively seriously. And I fail all the time at whatever the ideal would be. But I think that's part of the process. Again, especially if we're trying to not just keep a line, which might be important. Don't get me wrong. Tradition, etc. It might be important. But I'm not trying to just keep a line. I'm trying to figure some things out. I'm trying to be intellectually courageous. I'm trying to extend my curiosity into areas where, I can see that it's good by some framework that's bigger than just my own definition of it. I mean, again, I don't necessarily take all of my moves from, the existentialists or whatever, but I have to say that there are a number of important theories in philosophy broadly that show where harms are. Michel Foucault, another French philosopher from the 20th century, probably the most important thinker for me personally ever, that I didn't know as a, that I just read. And Foucault talks about the way that the systems create problems for individuals, for the goals of society. The systems concentrate power and they perpetuate power and they maintain their own supremacy just for the sake of it, not for any good purpose. And people get trampled under by that, right? And sometimes the systems become so corrupt and so involved in their own perpetuation that they lose track of whatever they were supposed to do in the first place. And then they're too powerful to disrupt in many cases. And so we get terrible, terrible political consequences. For example, I can look at other people being oppressed in other parts of the world, and I am able to analogize to the oppression that's going on outside my window in the United States. For people for people in the US in particular, there's a lot of it over here, but of course it's not just here. People in the US who look around and go, the world is so messed up. We're messed up. And we should be able to look at the problems that people have elsewhere and go, gosh, we could affect the systems here such that that problem isn't a real problem. Or maybe even in some ways help those folks. But let's just say, I don't want to make a foreign policy argument, but let's just say I want to look elsewhere and say, gosh, I don't want those things to happen here. Well, you got to look first. And then you got to analogize and you got to pull out the important lessons and you got to set those values and you've got to decide that even if I'm going to be super flexible and super creative, there has to be a structure I return to. Just one last point on this. When we were in our session, one of the things that I talked about was intellectual standards. We talk about universal intellectual standards as the foundation for critical thinking. And so when you talk about creativity, people are like, well, you can't, bring standards into creativity. Did you put the paint on the canvas or is it on the floor? Right? Accuracy is in there, whether we want to call it that or not. Did you do the thing you were trying to do? What are the questions this piece of art attempts to answer? And of course, I can be very avant-garde and say there are no questions in this art, whatever. The point is, my variability to do that is because there is a conversation surrounding questions broadly in aesthetics. And this is an artifact that is aesthetic. And so there are standards I can bring in to critique this, even if the artist doesn't acknowledge them. They're still there. So again, there's always structure, I think. Am I clear on what this art is about? And the artist might say, well, I don't care if you're clear about it or not. That's cool. Nonetheless, am I clear? like, nonetheless, is this the thing I want to buy? That's what I'm trying to figure out, artist. If you want to be a pure artist, that's cool, but how do you eat? Right? At some point, maybe the art needs to be connectable, right? And that would imply the existence of some kind of standard that any thinker who approached this thing could appeal to. Doesn't matter what their training was, right? It's sort of like when we share languages. Like, you and I are speaking English, but you and I also speak other languages that we don't have in common. And so if we started speaking languages that the other person didn't know, it wouldn't be clear, even if we were talking about the very same thing, right? So, there have to be some basic standards that we intersect with if we want to do anything, including communicate, but also shape society or build a better life for myself or whatever, I think there's something there. So I don't think you can really have a creative process. Let me say that.
as soon as you say process to me, I think there are intellectual standards. I think there's a logic, even if we can't find it. I think there is one, such that this thing, because it's a system, right? I mean, systems function according to the integration of their parts. And of course, sometimes the parts become so, um, sometimes the parts create emergent properties when they come together, right? These properties of the system that were never predictable just by looking at the intersection of the parts themselves. See, that's where the critical thinking stuff we talk about, that stuff being integrated, right? It's it's a bunch of different words and a bunch of different tools you can use to measure language and thinking outcomes and stuff like this. But when you put them all together, there are insights that people will start getting once the tools are all in their head and they start just carrying them around and using them for stuff. Just like when you become like a finance major or whatever in college, just for example, I bet you start looking at a lot of things and through the lens of finance just because that logic is there, whereas other people like the English majors aren't seeing it. They're not getting it from that point of view, so they're willing to spend the money and you're like, oh hell no way I'm spending that money, right? Because I understand the system in a more direct way. And so I think that once we have a fuller integration of the pieces, these emergent properties pop up and we have to be ready for them, right? Like life, right? I can take a bunch of organs and a bag of skin and bones and stuff and just throw them together and don't got life. All the pieces are together. I can even get them functioning. I can get machines hooked up to them and get the heart beating and get all the stuff, the blood pumping. I can make all this. Still isn't going to get up and walk around because I don't have it together in such a way that the emergent property comes out, right? That living part. We don't know necessarily how to get that part to come out, even when we know how all the pieces fit together. So that's the thing for a lot of systems. That's we can't see that from here, and I think that's where we can really see the value of going deeply into any system. It doesn't matter what it is. My mentor at the Foundation for Critical Thinking, Linda Elder, she often talks about tennis. Tennis is a system. We can talk about tennis in a great detail, but a lot of people who play tennis don't. Like they may focus on various pieces of their game, but in terms of seeing it as an entire system, such that once I am able to integrate a certain number of tennis moves, I can legitimately create on the tennis court. Like once I am in possession of a serve, a couple of volleys, a backhand, a forehand, I can get out there and play in this classic sense. Play, which is always creative, right? Because I'm not thinking about new moves now. They're integrated. And now what will emerge is my ability to do things that aren't those moves, right? And we see professionals do it, of course, when we watch them on TV. We do it ourselves when we get out there sometimes and play, and you do something and you go, oh, I'm not a tennis player, but that was pretty damn good, right? Or, I never would have thought that I could have done that, but look, I just did, right? And that is a function sometimes of luck, etc. Sometimes, especially when people start doing it over and over again, right? So my tennis partner, who I often play with, charges the net pretty regularly, and I gotten pretty good at just chipping that lob right over his head, like as soon as he comes up, right? And the first few times I did it, maybe luck. Now, I don't know. About it. and he comes to expect it, right? So now maybe this has gone into a slightly different place, but I had to have structure to create that move for myself. Like that wasn't something I practiced. It was just something that started to emerge, and then I worked on it in situ, which is how we live life. So I mean, where am I? If I've got 4 or 5 tools that I can go back and I can say these are the fundamentals of my tennis game, and then I've got a couple of maybe the same tools, maybe a couple other tools that I say these are the keys to my tennis game. Well, okay, then where, can't I see then that the structure and the creativity are linked? Without the fundamentals, without the keys, I would not be able to create. Right. So, I mean, I think all that's very good. I think all that's very dangerous.
That's super interesting, and that has a couple of implications to me. If there are systems anyway, so we better understand them.
Yeah, I feel
The
that
best we can, we can,
way.
and also especially, I mean, that's a bit my personal revelation. Also, what when it comes down to thinking, yeah, and at your workshop, like from how I witnessed it, it was really learning the system of our thinking, which is in place anyway. So we better learn it so that we can think possibly more coherent, with less biases, like discover our blind spots somehow, and like be a bit more constructive. And
Right.
and the funny thing is, or when I finished my school and was about what should I study or do with my life, it like, really my criteria was to make money and be successful. Philosophy or critical thinking at that time sounded to me as like something for, like, and I'm honest, like for losers. Yeah, it's like like that's for those who don't manage life. Yeah, to be successful in life. Yeah, and maybe like isolate.
You're out there sitting under a bush somewhere with your plastic bag. You need some.
Yeah. Yeah, isolating yourself a little bit in library or so from society.
Right.
And I must say, little did I know. And like my personal journey is also to realize that like life is not really about matter. Yeah, like there's it's like about experience, and also matter doesn't equate any fulfillment at all. And so and the personal like revelation was also in school or in education, that's it was about like like what is the, what is the knowledge, or what should I need, what do I need to learn, and like this is the truth. Yeah, like repeat it, remember it, and then and then be measured with tests, or how good I could remember that. It was never about how to think. And when I listen to you again now, like philosophy or critical thinking seems so elementary in how we approach life. And like, would you say, and I mean, I have like my answer to that. Would you say that everyone would benefit from learning critical thinking, or like even study philosophy?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, I'm very much with the historical Socrates on this, right? In his in the account that we have of his trial, before he was executed by the state, he once the guilty verdict came down. He thought he'd been doing something really good for society, walking around and questioning everybody and all this, but apparently the society didn't dig it as much as he thought. So when the guilty verdict came down, he said, you guys, you think that I'm saying all these nasty things about the gods and about society, and that I'm, corrupting everything with my beliefs, and I've told you that's not true, and that I was really doing a very pious thing. Like, he thought he was kind of on a religious mission, to help people think better, right? But then he said, so you didn't believe that. But if I told you that I did what I did because the best thing for every one of us to do every day is to think about these questions and to question one another and to think about virtue and to try to figure out how to be a better person, you'll believe me even less. And that's that's what I think we should be doing. I think we ought to be doing that. We ought to be spending time having conversations about what is it to be the best human being that I can be. I've got a son who I love very much. He's about 20 years old now, and he loves video games, and he spends an awful lot of time playing video games. And sometimes I just get this, I take this particular angle with him. I love video games too. No shade on video games, but I mean, we could perhaps do some other things with our time some days, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be morning till night, just video games, just because we have the leisure, right? We could be doing other things to improve ourselves. And I'll tell you what, the kid's a deep thinker about video games, not a kid anymore, deep thinker about video games, very sharp problem solving skills. He can tell you his process. Oh, it's beautiful when he talks about his process of thinking through problems in video games. I use them in my critical thinking seminars all the time. And I use it for my own thinking. It's very instructive. But like, why didn't you take out the trash? Did you get the laundry done? You know, like, what's going on with school? Ooh, what do you mean? This is way less complicated than your video game. Like, way less. What are you doing? Right? And that's where I think, you know, we don't always see the ways that these things are already in our thinking. The questions of philosophy are, I mean, in many ways they're timeless. You know, we're talking about self-driving cars right now. And a big question that I keep bringing up in my business ethics class is, should the self-driving car, so we're in a scenario where the car is going to wreck. The car knows it's going to wreck. When you and I wreck a car, we just, you know, we do something in the last minute, like we try to, right? The car can analyze all the factors and come up with a plan in just a few seconds. It's like me falling. It's got all this time. And the car will be able to decide, based on its programming, whether it saves the driver or saves the pedestrians. It will be able to calculate that based on programming, not random values this driver has. So which way should it be programmed? Should it be programmed to always preserve the driver's life 100% of the time? Or should there be some other programming than that? And this becomes a difficult one, I think, for people to work out, because of course you say, we want, you know, I don't want to buy a car that's not going to preserve my life. And so I don't want to get in that car. But,
Probably based on the social score.
What's that? Based on? Right. I mean, that's the thing too. Start having these cars making these decisions, and they're all hooked into every system that we have. Well, what happens in places where there are these kinds of constructions? Yeah. Oh, sorry, you should have been a little bit nicer at the grocery. So yeah. So anyway, I think that it's important that we study philosophy no matter what we're doing, because these systems are already in place. These questions are already there. We're still asking. The questions of ethics are still the questions, right? How should I treat myself? How should I treat others? We are always and already in the world of others. Always and already. There's no just me. So, I mean, that increases the complexity incredibly from my point of view, because I'm going to get checked by society if I'm only worried about me. Right? In most cases, because none of us, I mean, few of us anyway, are so powerful to avoid that. Right? And then the question is, should we let some people become so powerful that they can avoid that? Is that socially desirable? Right? And of course, I'm back to a problem that involves everybody else. So yeah, philosophy is super valuable, I think, for living and for governance and for all of it. I think everybody should give it a shot.
I want to be respectful of your time. We're already talking for quite a bit.
Well, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. We can probably, I should start moving in the direction of wrapping up, but we can
Yeah.
More.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what you're saying, no, everybody should think about ethics, philosophy, etc. But then also, that's where I come from. Almost a psychopathic mindset, where it's really moral relativism. What's good for me, yeah, it's good. What's bad for me is bad, and from that perspective, there's not really an incentive to think of others, yeah, because it's just like giving something away from what you have. There's no understanding, even possible, yeah, of the potential gain you're getting, because you from that mindset, yeah, you there's there's not yet an empathetic understanding, possibly, yeah. So you cannot sense yet what you're getting from giving something away, yeah, by thinking on others. So that's a bit my personal story, and that was really interesting. But I also see the difficulty in our society to motivate people to yeah, go beyond perception. Yeah.
Well, it's quite right, because we're in this position where the world, the world comes back to me. It's one of the things that phenomenology points out, is that my perception starts with me always.
Hmm.
Like it's I I'm a thinker that's perceiving. Like that's my experience. And so if I want to think beyond that, if I believe that I am literally not the center of everything, because there are other human beings just like me, right? And they would be having the same experience. And so they would be the center of their thing. Automatically now we have no center, right? Because everyone's their own. That that should create a certain insight, I think, into the nature of all of us being here together, right? We all have this perception of the world coming back to me always, but we know that everyone else has that perception too. For people like Jean-Paul Sartre, that creates conflict. It creates inherent conflict, that knowledge, right? And I actually worked on this a lot when I was working on my master's degree in philosophy. Sartre was trying to follow this phenomenological path laid out by this guy, Edmund Husserl. Here's a nerdy point for you. But Husserl had a student named Edith Stein. So she was a Carmelite nun in living in Europe in World War II. She was killed during the Holocaust, actually. But she, before that, got a PhD in philosophy, right? And worked closely with Husserl. And she wrote a book, I think the only book she published, that was about how this connection that I've just described that causes people like Sartre to um, to turn egoistic. For her, it was evidence of why we need empathy. Like we need to connect with others because it's not just the first part, it's the totality that everybody's having this, and that all of us are having these same sort of problems with reconciling the difficulty of society and self, right? And what were the appropriate values when we look at the group and we look at self. I mean, all of us are having these problems, and the way to do that is to connect with one another, not to drive one another apart in this way that Sartre described, through sort of conflict, right? And so I think for me that was super insightful. That was really I I had been reading the existentialists for a long time because I was really wrapped up in myself, and I saw a strong self-oriented message in there. But then I started to see that there were these other aspects that really turned us back toward others and the importance of others, not just for what they can get for us, but just in their own right. And so as I started to go more deeply into philosophy and especially into ethics, where most of my professional energies are spent these days, I really found that the thinking and the social processes are deeply linked, right? And not just for my benefit, and it's not just that, right? Then the question becomes, well, how do I, in a world that constantly encourages me to be oriented toward myself, like the invisible hand, right? I help me and that helps you somehow, but I don't know anything about it, like that business, right? I mean, in a world that encourages that at every turn, how do I genuinely explore care? And how do I do that without religion? Like, how do I do that without acquiescing to, as we say, criteria less, right? So, not criteria rich environments, which critical thinking would enjoy working with, right? Um, but sort of how do I avoid these areas where you just people suggest things, and based upon the strength of authority or charisma or um, intuition, I go, oh yes, definitely. Um, I wasn't finding a lot of luck with that, right? And so I think that um, these tools really helped me, in this way through philosophy, right? And through philosophy that wasn't necessarily trying to be focused on compassion. I found a couple of areas that recontextualized that for me and allowed me to start thinking about this in a much more expansive way. It's what Heidegger would want for, when he talked about society, he was talking about it in a very broad and expansive way, and that the individual is wrapped up with others. And somehow in some of the existentialist literature, some of that gets degraded a little bit. And then as we get deeper into the 20th century, and especially in the U.S., the rise of shareholder economics and stuff like this, it gets degraded even more. There's so much graft, so much fraud that's happening everywhere, in terms of ideas, right? Ideas are used as brand bait. Um, they're not put out there for their own sake, so that people will consider them and either accept or reject them on their merits, right? If you accept or reject an idea, you're accepting or rejecting a product as well. So there's this thing tied together all the time, and you're accepting or rejecting a whole bill of goods that's like a lifestyle, because that's attached to the branding. And we got to get back. Philosophy at least will allow us to examine ideas for themselves, right, in their own environments. And that's something that I think also makes it very useful, is learning the tools to sort of dig down and look at definitions and consider definitions and compare them to the broadly used examples, and then ask yourself, where are the divergences, and then are those divergences meaningful, and if so, how? And then how does that come back to the way people live their lives, and do I have examples of that, or are these just sort of intuitions of mine? And then if I have those examples, can I go back and link them directly with the theoretical approaches that I think are relevant within the examples, which is why I started this in the first place, so that they can be shared, and also so that they can be contemplated deeply by me, right? Because maybe, I mean, how many times is my first work my best work, right? I mean, when does that happen? I mean, a lot of times that's the work we get, right? We get the one shot at it. But I mean, surely I would have done it differently if I'd had the chance to, like I was when I was in college or whatever, draft. We can do that with ideas. Just keep on upgrading our ideas, check them, change them, new ideas, new way, and our ways of living can go with that. I mean, there's such a broad multiplicity, and the problem is, of course, that so much of that it's not even itself genuine. Heidegger talked about it as inauthentic, because all I do is copy other people's ways of living. I say, oh shit, I don't want to be a teacher anymore. I want to be a firefighter, right? Because firefighters look cool. So I go out there and I copy the firefighters, and I learn their trade, and I follow in their ways. And then I'm a firefighter. I go, oh, I don't like this. I want to be an accountant. Stockbrokers really got it going on, right? So I go manage a hedge fund down the line, right? And then I'm doing that for a while, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I want to go be a lifeguard in a swimming pool. I mean, the thing is that I can just keep on jumping around, because something in here for Heidegger, for Sartre, for Foucault, something in here is dissatisfying, right? Maybe for the historical Buddha, something in here is dissatisfying to me, right? With this life, with these ideas, with this approach to the self. And so I'm able to change those. And when I change those, I change my fundamental way of living. I change my values. Now, some people will say that this is not possible, right? There's certainly schools of thought that say you can't really do this. That like, I'm set. Like my values and my persona and my everything are set. And all of these would be the real role play if I tried to change and be someone that like maybe not the person I grew up as. The person I grew up as was a racist, was a misogynist, was deeply intolerant of other cultures and other views, was deeply embedded in institutions, and whatever others said was right, was beholden to authority just because it was the authority. I don't find those characteristics. I'm not blaming anyone in particular for the way that I turned out. I'm just saying I don't blame those. I don't think those characteristics are set. I
Hmm.
think, I mean, I like to say, I would like to think that I've been able to challenge the racist ideas that I grew up with to the extent that they were there, the misogynistic ideas, the ideas that caused me to be less open-minded, the ideas that closed me off from other cultures, from other ways of living, etc. I would like to think that I've been able to challenge those and change those. And this happened through years and years and years of steps and processes and various ways of coming at the ideas, some of which were by myself and some of which were with others. And a lot of it has to do with just my professional work every day. I'm very fortunate that this provides me opportunities to do self work. And while I talk to other people about self work, but those are absolutely, I mean, all of these processes are absolutely things that people can, in my experience and the experience of those who I work with, you can get better.
Hmm.
Like, improvement can happen, and we can fundamentally change the people who we are, not, not on a vibrational level or something maybe, but I mean, when it comes down to the values that I have and the way that I want to live in the world, a lot of options. Nobody's fixed, I don't think. Culture limits us, right? Opportunities limit
Hmm.
us, economics limit us, stuff like that. But I mean, in my own thinking, the kind of person who I want to be, given the parts of my life that aren't necessarily changeable, like I'm not in a position to move to another country with a different set of opportunities, right? But I mean, within those limitations, whatever they are, I mean, I can be whoever I want to be.
Hmm.
I hope
Hmm.
people will give that a shot.
Hmm. Yeah. As said before, yeah, I think we're talking for 2 hours. Or like, and just for transparency, I have a lot more questions.
Well, we should come back and do it again if you feel like you have the time at some point.
Like from my side, at any time, I really enjoy it, and like it's kind of like it's just opening more and more questions, to be honest.
Well, I like talking about all this stuff, and I like
Uh-huh.
sharing it. And I mean, I'd hate to, for your viewers and whatnot, I'd hate for it to be boring. But I mean,
Oh no, I don't think so. It's
it'll be good. If you think it'll be a good fit, I mean, I'm happy to do this again.
oh yeah, yeah. Like yes, from my side, it would be an absolute pleasure. And
Cool. Well, let's put
yeah,
something on the calendar. Let's get that, and we'll come back, and you can refine some of your questions. Maybe we can go in some different directions now that I've laid out my sort of basic ideas. So thanks for your interest.
yeah. Thank you again, yeah, for taking the time, sharing your experience, wisdom here with us, your journey, and inspiring us for thinking. And
Thanks.
yeah, I will add information about you or like whatever you want to be shared, like to the show notes and also to the Critical Thinking Institute. So
Thank you,
people
thank
can.
you. Well, I would like one thing in particular to be cool. I mean, any of the stuff from LinkedIn is cool, I suppose, but in particular, if you could share the maybe the link to the martial arts organization. It doesn't have to
Oh,
be. It doesn't have to be my school. It can be the Japanese school. That's cool. They have an English website also. But also the critical thinking podcast to be cool. That critical thinking.
Absolutely.
You can just link to that on SoundCloud or something. And
Hmm.
everything else is completely up to you. But those things I think would be super fun, in addition to the foundation, of course. So
Yeah, and if there's something else you want to share, please go.
I appreciate that. Yeah, well, and for sure, if you just want to, I mean, if you wanted to just put the link on there for LinkedIn or whatever, I mean, that'd be okay too. I don't care. People can.
So I will share whatever you want, and I can also double check per email with you, so to be sure that I put the
Sure, sure. Yeah, whatever. Just
right
put
things in.
together whatever you like, and I'm sure it's fine with me. But if you're wondering if this will work for me, you can just run it past me. I'm happy to check off.
Well, yeah. Then thank you again. Yeah, I've been enjoying this very much, and
Thank you.
looking forward to our next conversation already. Yeah,
Me
thank
too,
you.
Simon. Thanks for all your interest today, and for making the time for me, and for helping to share some of these ideas. So I'm glad you're interested.